Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 239, From Seeking Approval to Self-Love, A Journey Within. Well, welcome back as we finish out this first month of the new year, talking all about shedding what no longer works for us and stepping into our true potential this year. From shame to avoidance, we've been getting into some heavy but I think necessary stuff that we need to talk about if we're going to work on our self-confidence. Well, this week we finish out the month with one of my favorite parts of the work, and that is turning within for approval and for our why we do something, instead of looking out there to feel good enough and to feel good about ourselves. But before we do, if you struggle with approval seeking, consider taking the work a bit deeper and give yourself the gift of change. You've heard me talking about the course that I'm so excited to have launched. And it's an immersive 12-module self-paced program with group coaching, which is fabulous, and one-on-one support coaching from me if and when you need it. Just hit the link in the show notes and you'll be taken right to it. If you have any questions or concerns at all, please reach out. I'm right here. But know that part of working on your self-confidence is investing in yourself. And you are worth taking this work deeper, and you can really make some huge changes in your life. All right, so let's get into it. First, let's look at ways that we might outsource approval. Seeking external validation. So when we seek approval in relationships or professional settings, it can kind of set up what I think is a dangerous dependency, because it fosters a reliance on external validation of our worth, external validation for our identity. And that can be really dangerous because we are basing that upon a few things, what people think of us and how well things go. And so that's kind of scary. And that's why we want to talk about these things first before we get into how to shift that to internal. So what do I mean by emotional dependency? Well, in relationships, when we're constantly seeking approval from our partners and our friends and our family, the need for constant reassurance or validation is going to lead to a lot of insecurity, a lot of self-abandonment, and tons of anxiety. And we know it's going to be causing great big problems in your relationships. It's uncomfortable for both of you. In your professional settings, when we're looking to colleagues and our superiors, we can look at recognition and praise as a primary source of validation, and it can really impact your emotional well-being. Think about how stressful that is. Think about how much anxiety that creates day in, day out on the job. You kind of have to stay in that vigilant space. How can you be present and be yourself and be confident and grounded when you're constantly approval seeking? And it could go down a lot of different rabbit holes in terms of what that does to your relationships with your peers, how genuine are your relationships with people, that kind of thing. The other big thing it does is it messes with our identity. And it creates what we call identity fusion, where your sense of self becomes intertwined and enmeshed, I think, with other people's approval, especially your partners, because they're the closest to you and their opinion matters a lot, just like your parents' opinion matters. This creates a loss of personal boundaries, and how in the world can you make independent decisions? People argue with me all the time. Yes, Mary, I think for myself. How can you? It's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know until you get out of it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was thinking clearly, and I wasn't. Kind of like having surgery, being on pain meds and thinking that you're fine. You're not fine. You can't see that in the moment, but the people at your bedside can. In work settings, this seeking approval is going to lead to identity fusion with the workplace. Boy, we could do a whole episode just on that, where you're going to struggle to differentiate from your personal identity from your professional one. You can put all your eggs in that basket, and work is going to be way too important and probably be prioritized a little too much in your life. So it might be at the expense of other things. And I see that all the time. Very driven people are often very insecure people, and they need to focus on work primarily at the expense of their relationships and their self-care and their health often, because that need for approval is huge and the pull is very strong. When we outsource, there's that fear of rejection. The fear that disapproval could lead to abandonment or a breakdown in the relationship. So we're going to excessively seek that validation. At work, the fear of not being accepted or valued can really limit our willingness to take a risk and express our authentic selves and to be who we really are. It has a big impact on decision making. So in relationships, when we have that constant need for approval, like we mentioned earlier, you're going to prioritize decisions that you believe are going to garner approval rather than making choices based on your true desires or values. And that's how we begin to lose ourselves in our relationships. Because you have that awful choice. Either I speak up for what I want, or I play it safe and do what my partner wants or do what I think would make them happy. We're not supposed to have to choose that. We can negotiate that for sure, and that's what it's supposed to look like, but we're not supposed to choose that ahead of time. There's a big vulnerability to manipulation here too, and I want to stop here and talk about how other people can really exploit your need for validation. And so there's going to be a power differential there, and that's not good. And at work, it can make you more susceptible to being manipulated by colleagues or superiors because guess what? They know that you're going to stay all weekend and get the work done. They know you'll do anything. It hammers your self-confidence. So over time, when we rely heavily on external approval, it almost always is at the expense of believing in ourselves. We're going to doubt our abilities. We're going to question our worth. Because again, you have that constant supply from out there that if that dries up or is variable, that's going to be really tough. Along with this, there's a big difficulty handling criticism. So in our personal relationships, it's going to be almost impossible to take constructive feedback in a healthy way or handle a healthy disagreement because it's going to be perceived as a threat to your self-worth. It's going to lead to defensiveness and or avoidance. You're going to shut down conversations. You're not going to be able to solve problems with your partner or your friend or your family member or your kids. You can't do both. It's really tough to do. We either are open to constructive feedback and have reduced our shame enough and we know who we are enough in order to take that in and it hurts, but we value it. Or we have to push it away and shut it down and be defensive and manipulative because that's too scary. This gives you a sense of some of the ways that we look outside of ourselves to be okay. If people love me, I'm okay. If I have made them happy today, I'm okay. And again, it's really dangerous. I mean, you have no control over what's going to happen out there. And plus, these people are human. They're going to have bad days too. So think about it for a moment, how scary it is that your identity and your worth is dependent upon someone's mood that day. Think about that for a moment. That's pretty overwhelmingly scary. It's so tenuous. That's not constant. It can't be. And it also, by the way, is a bottomless pit and you'll never be done. It'll never be enough. Speaking of never enough, this goes hand in hand with perfectionism. Perfectionism is when we have a relentless pursuit of flawlessness. Very high standards, often accompanied by a tendency to be highly critical of ourselves. we strive for that perfection in all areas, usually work, relationships, personal achievements. And there's a strong connection between perfectionism and seeking approval. Let's talk about that for a moment. Back to the external validation. So perfectionists often seek external validation as a measure of their worth. I mean, that's where you get it from. They believe, now this could be conscious or subconscious. So don't say, well, I don't believe that. Hang in there with me. This might be driven subconsciously for you and you're not even aware of it. They believe that if they achieve perfection, they'll be more likely to gain approval and recognition from other people. And this creates a vicious cycle where they're constantly seeking affirmation from external sources, like we just talked about a moment ago. Along with this, here comes the fear of failure and disapproval that might come with it. And this fear is going to drive them to seek approval from others as a way to avoid that perceived shame or judgment, running from the shame. So you need constant reassurance. And this is a way to mitigate the anxiety associated with potential criticism. Can't take it in. Along with this, here come the unrealistic standards. Very high, usually impossibly high standards. High standards like, I can't ever make a mistake. I can't ever lose my keys. I can't ever. There's always and never very black and white binary thinking. So it's not just a desire for personal excellence, which in and of itself is great. But there's a belief, this is key, there's the belief that if you meet these standards, it's going to lead to approval and admiration. But it's never enough. And what if you don't get that? So performance is linked to your self-worth. If you're a perfectionist, your self-worth is directly tied to your performance. If you excel and achieve perfection, you have that temporary sense of approval and validation. That is like fleeting and momentary. However, that's even if you let yourself have that moment, because any perceived failure or falling short of your impossibly high standards is going to lead to a significant blow to your self-esteem and then a renewed quest for external validation, the vicious cycle. You know how it's hard sometimes to just embrace an experience and all the great stuff because you're picking out the one thing that you forgot or the one thing you did wrong. And your brain's looking for that. So everyone's brain kind of looks for that. But perfectionists can't let go of that. They can't say, you know what, most of the people really enjoyed the show. There are a few people that didn't, and that's okay because not everybody's going to love me. They get hung up and they ruminate on the 3 people that didn't like the show. There's often a lot of comparison with other people. Lots of social comparison, measuring your success and your achievements against other people's success and achievements. And creating a benchmark for seeking approval. Like if they see other people as more successful or accomplished, that's going to be a big driver. So you see how it becomes about other people, not even about you anymore. Now, perfectionism has a huge impact on relationships, on your partners, your friends, your colleagues, because guess what? You are, either consciously or not, going to expect them to also meet similarly high standards, whether they want to or not. And that is really hard because you're going to pressure and you're going to judge and you're going to make yourself impossible to be around. I'm not saying don't have standards, but we got to find that middle ground between perfectionism and no boundaries so that it doesn't take a toll on the people that we care about. Perfectionism means never feeling good enough. It'll never be enough. It's a bottomless bucket. And your brain is going to help you do this. Like, let's say you meet that expectation, you did it, you're immediately going to raise the bar and find a new one. Because you never will feel finally validated and accepted that way, but you don't know that. So you're going to keep going for it and going for it and going for it. And this all really impairs your well-being, especially your mental health. It takes a huge toll, high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, the roller coaster, mood swings, the fear of not meeting impossibly high standards. Come on, it's that constant fight or flight that I mentioned in the beginning. It's a prison. It's a prison that takes a huge toll. All right, so where does all this come from? You know what I'm going to say. It started a long time ago. Conditional love is a big thing that we talk about here on the show because I think it's so important. So that refers to a parenting style where love and approval are contingent upon a child's behavior, their achievements, or maybe an adherence to certain expectations. This form of parenting can really have a profound impact on the development of their kids' self-esteem. Huge impact. And it creates that perpetual need for external approval. Of course. I mean, it makes sense. And that poor parent was probably parented in the same way. Never feeling good enough. And so that's all they know. So that was all they knew in terms of how to try to shape their child's behavior. So obviously, kids raised with conditional love are going to grow up associating their self-worth with external accomplishments and or with meeting expectations set by their caregivers. So this creates a pattern where they believe they're only lovable and worthy if they continuously meet these conditions. Because there's that huge fear of rejection. We need parental approval. We don't just want it, we need it for survival. Kids who experience conditional love, even if it's never mentioned, even if the parent never meant that, the kid absorbed that. The kid absorbed it. There's that fear of rejection and the idea that if love is conditional, then it can lead them to believe that any deviation from the expected behavior is going to result in withdrawal of affection and or approval. It's usually both. Then they're going to look outside of themselves. Parents often try to raise their kids to be responsible and get good grades because they want them to have a good life. However, they can cross that line very easily and create that conditional love setup, where kids believe that their love, that the parents' love is tied to their performance or meeting certain standards. And this could be construed, again, subliminally at the dinner table, because parents aren't having open and vulnerable conversations where they say, I'm sorry, I don't want to make you think that if you don't get A's, that we don't love you. Of course we love you. We just want you to do the best you can so you can be happy with yourself. But it can also be, maybe the kid isn't allowed to spill the milk or forget their homework or hit their brother. How parents handle those stressful situations in the moment can severely impact a kid's sense of either conditional or unconditional love. So kids who grow up with conditional love are going to struggle to validate themselves internally because obviously they internalize the critical parent, not the loving one. The lack of unconditional love and acceptance will lead to ongoing reliance on those external sources for affirmation, for approval, for acceptance, for belongingness. So there's been a lot of research that has explored the impact of parenting styles on self-esteem. And so that's a whole nother show to get into all of that, but suffice it to say, really controlling households with strict rules, authoritarian parenting, overly permissive parenting can do the same thing because there's a vacuum. There aren't clear boundaries, and that leads to a lot of insecurity for the kid because they don't even know where the boundaries are. They don't know what the expectations are, so that creates its own anxiety and a lack of self-discipline, but a lot of perfectionism as well. So there's long-term impacts. There's a lot of longitudinal research out there that backs that up, and you can go check that out if you are so inclined. But it comes from childhood, and it just gets cemented over time. And what matters is first recognizing if that's you, anywhere you are on that continuum of approval seeking and perfectionism and lack of boundaries and emotional trauma and all those things. And I want to talk today about how do you get from there to gaining your own self-approval. And when you first start doing this work, boy, that might seem so far off in the distance that you can't even see it, but it's not. And so what I want to talk about is a little bit of a self-reflection exercise. So if you're in a space where you can't write things down, it's okay. Just trust whatever comes up, and you can come back and replay this later when you have time to write. But if you do, If you have time to grab a pen, a paper, or a journal or something to write on, that would be lovely. And handwriting's always better, but if you need to use your phone, that's cool too. So at the end of the day, I think, and you've heard me say this before, that building our own acceptance and our own approval is all about first determining who we are becoming. And why do we want to become that person? And no matter where you are in the work, you can start this. And it's okay. Even if you have more grief work to do and trauma work and lots of boundary work and you just started learning about boundaries. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to try to map out that person you're on your way to being. I actually want you to do that because that's going to be the fire under your butt when you get frustrated or it's taking too long or you lack motivation on a certain Tuesday. It's actually really great and it gives you hope. Okay, so let's do a simple self-reflection exercise. And this is something I want you to take and run with it and do whatever you want with it. So even if you're not sure of what these things are, I just want you to trust what kind of pops up in your heart. Just go with that. And if there's more to work on later, that's fine too. All right. So try to find a quiet space if you can, where you can relax for a little bit and take some deep breaths to really center yourself and try to clear your mind for a moment and try to find a calm mental space if you can, or whatever you can grab. So you want to think about for a moment a few of your past achievements, and they could be anything. Moments in your life that made you feel proud or fulfilled. That could be personal, academic, professional, relational, any area that holds significance for you. Doesn't matter what it is. And it's not about external approval. Do you see how that probably already popped up immediately when you try to do this? So just jot a few things down. And while you're doing that, try to think of themes or values that seem to underpin these achievements. For example, like for some people, maybe their achievements involve teamwork or collaboration. And that's a value, right? That's a core value that they may not even realize that they had. Think about peak experiences. What are some moments that come to mind when you felt truly happy, fulfilled, or at least content, relaxed? What were you doing? And why did those moments stand out so much? Think about the activities or the aspects that really contributed to those positive feelings. Like, what was that about? And if you only have time to jot down the questions here and you want to sit with the answers later, that's totally fine. What about your passions? Reflect for a moment on any activities or subjects that genuinely excite or interest you. What are the things that you enjoy doing even if there's no external reward, right? You're not getting paid for it. They can really provide insights into what you're passionate about because you kind of can't help it. The next thing, if you know what some of these are, jot down a few of your values. Now, a values exercise is a thorough thing that we need to take some time and sit with. And I actually devote a whole module in the course on beliefs and values because they are driving the bus, like you've heard me say, of all of our behavior and all of our choices, whether we recognize that or not. And so they're really important to look at in terms of building self-confidence and lowering anxiety. You might have a few that you want to jot down, like love or honesty or creativity, caring, kindness, truth, adventure. So those are a few things about yourself. And again, this is something, it's a kind of exercise, I think, that you can take and run with it. And I will have it listed in the newsletter. So if you get that, you'll have that PDF to download. So don't stress about if you don't have a chance to write everything down now. It's all good. And if you don't get the newsletter, you can sign up for it in the show notes. Very simple. Think about now what you want to achieve in your life in the short term, like within the next year. And you can write down a few things. Like, what are a few things? It could be anything. Nothing's too small. Write these answers down before you think about it and think about what would people think about them. They can be related to your personal development, maybe your career, maybe your relationships, your health, any area of your life. And when you work on all of this, you want to kind of prioritize some things like what matters most right now. Like, yeah, I want to do that dream, but this other thing is priority right now because. So doing an order of business to things. Let's say you've done all this, then I want you to work on visualizing yourself achieving some of these things and how it feels really good. And you feel really good about yourself because you followed through on something that you said mattered to you, regardless what anyone else thinks. I've had clients write out a personal mission statement. Like, what are your core values today? What you know today, you're going to grow into bigger and better values as you go in this work. So don't worry about it. What are you about? And what do you want to become and why? And you could just be sitting here thinking, I just don't want to hurt anymore. And that is good enough. I want calm and peace in my life, you say. That is a good enough driver. Because here's the thing. That is going to guide you to the next ones. Start where you are, be where you are. You don't have to wait. You know, perfectionism is going to make you wait until it's too late to do anything. Don't do that. A big thing we have to do along with this is to work on boundaries because they preserve our individuality and our identity. They tell us where we end and others begin. They act as emotional shields, protecting us from the negative impact of external influences. Healthy boundaries help protect us from emotional manipulation and any mistreatment that could really hurt our self-esteem. Creates a sense of healthy autonomy and independence. We get to make decisions based on our own values and what we're passionate about, like we just talked about, rather than what other people want us to be or do. There's lots of great things about boundaries. And so if boundaries are something that you need to work on, consider grabbing the course because there's 2 whole modules on it. The boundaries keep you focusing more on yourself than out there. And sometimes for some people, this is all day long at first. They're like, nope, what's about me? That's about them. But what's about me? What do I think about that? How do I feel about that and why? Why does it bother me? Oh, that's right, because that goes against something that I'm saying that I value. Well, okay, so I'm going against myself. Anytime we go against ourselves and we look out there to be okay, we're in trouble. We can't do that and have self-esteem. We can't do that and not have anxiety. We can't do that and not have depression as well. We can't do that and usually not have health issues. Stress-induced health issues. We can't do that and have healthy relationships. So this is really important for us to work on. And even if you've started working on this, it's a journey. Keep going. There's more work to do. So today we looked at the concept of gaining self-approval as opposed to relying on an external validation. We talked about common ways we can outsource our sense of approval and how the roots of that are in childhood, looking for parental approval, because when we were kids, we didn't know better. Then we looked at perfectionism and how an awful prison it can be in a bottomless bucket, and how these things become lifelong until we work on them. Then we did a reflection exercise where you can really dig into who you're becoming and why, what matters to you, and what do you want for your life. It's really important that if you're struggling with this, to get some support and some love around you so that you can break free from this awful cycle of seeking external validation. Instead, you can set realistic goals for yourself. You can prioritize your well-being. You can start working on things like boundaries and self-care, journaling, reflecting, finding people that you can tell the truth to so that you can begin feeling better and better about yourself. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope this was helpful. This whole month has been a lot of heavy stuff about letting go of what no longer serves you. And know that you deserve to feel better and to live better and to be happier, because we all do. And if you need support, I have a few coaching slots opening up next month. Contact me, Go to ownitpowercast.com, find me on social, and I'll be happy to support you. Jump into our private Facebook group. The link is right there in the show notes. That is a great place for you to find healthy support, find the tools, talk about what you're working on and how that's going and what you're struggling with. Because we can't do this work alone. I also have a free resource coming out in a few weeks, and I'm really excited to share that with you. So more to come on that. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.